Hey, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to change the response time of the knobs in CS Control while you're controlling plugins. We're also going to touch base on global commands, and we're going to talk about cycling plugins and Audio Suite plugins. Now, we've mapped the 7-band EQ in a previous video, and they're all set to a normal response. But while I'm controlling this knob, if I hold down the control key, the knob automatically goes into a fine mode. And as you can see by my fingers here, I'm turning this quite a bit and it's moving very little. And this is very good for doing fine adjustments on compressors or EQs like this. And right now I'm getting 1/10 of a dB movements on this knob here. So it's great for fine control. Conversely, if you hold down the shift key while turning a knob, you get a very coarse response, and you only have to move the knob just a little bit for it to swing rapidly from one end of its range to the other. So that's coarse. If you hold down Control and Shift, you sort of get a coarser version of fine, which I just threw in there for the heck of it. And the other option is if you hold the Option key down, it's the same as if you Option clicked on a knob. So if you have your knobs set in a whole bunch of different directions, like that, and you want to reset the knob, if you hold down Option and turn the knob, it will reset the EQ knobs back to their original factory defaults. So that is how you control response curves. Now you can also use your controller and modifier keys to change banks on a plugin. So we'll open up the map and we can see we have two banks, and in the previous video I was switching banks back and forth using the buttons on the surface. But you can do this quite easily with the buttons and modifier keys. So to change banks, hold the shift key down on your keyboard, and then the first two buttons on your controller become bank back and bank forward. So I can switch back and forth using the buttons on my controller and the shift knob. And when you have a lot of banks, this comes in very handy. Now, the final thing we're going to talk about here are the global commands. Now, global commands are commands that are universal across inserts and Audio Suite plugins. And I included these global commands so you wouldn't have to program them on every plugin and on every bank. It's universal and they work with plugins whether or not they've been mapped. So the global commands are as follows. If you hold down the command key on your keyboard, the first three buttons wind up being bypass, preview, and render. So here we are on a very normal plugin, and when I press the first button on my controller, we are toggling the bypass button on the plugin. And if I call up the Audio Suite version of this plugin here, that same command works with Audio Suite as well. And let me get some bands going there so you can see what's going on. There we go. And while you're in Audio Suite, if you hold the command key down and press the second button on your controller, that becomes a preview. It toggles preview on and off. And let's change the bank with the shift key. And let's crank up the input gain and the output gain, and hold down command and press the third button on our controller, and that becomes a render. As you can see with the waveform up on top there, I'm decking it because I have so much gain on the Audio Suite plugin. And finally, we'll talk about plugin cycling. To cycle through the plugins on your track, just hold down the control key, and then the first two buttons on your controller now become cycle buttons. So right now we're on the EQ7 here, and with control and cycle forward, we're going to go to the RX, and then it'll go back to the first insert, which is the SSL. And as you can see, we are cycling forward and backwards on the inserts of our track. Now, should any of the plugins be bypassed, the app will skip over the bypass plugins, which is pretty handy. And the same thing applies for Audio Suite plugins. I'm going to open up a couple more Audio Suites just for the heck of it. And let's get one more. Oh no, let's get that guy. And if you hold down Control and Option, you now cycle through all of your Audio Suite plugins. And all the while, the map display will update to let you know what's going on. If I let go of the Option key, now I would be cycling through the inserts. And that is cycling global commands, and response modification, all using and facilitating the modifier keys on your computer keyboard.